Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is part two of our Brothers Beyond episode. My name's Andrew. This is my co-host, Ted. And today we're going to continue our conversation about toxic masculinity, patriarchy, male friendships, and the loneliness epidemic. In part one, we talked a lot about kind of the big societal picture of things. And I'm curious about what has been your personal experience of these things in your life, Ted.
Yeah. So a lot of the perspective I'll give is as a gay man, which I think is slightly different than for straight men.
Yep.
Certainly there's overlap as well, but I grew up in a small town in the Midwest in the 90s. And at that time, being gay was not all that accepted. In fact, it was something that was made fun of quite a lot. Certainly there's still some of that exists today, although thankfully I'm glad to see that's kind of going away and evolving quite a bit in recent years. But very grateful for that for the sake of our youth today. But for me growing up, when it comes to like the loneliness epidemic, like I felt very lonely as a kid because I felt very different from the other boys in my class. I felt like I couldn't relate to them. I was not somebody who was very athletic or really all that interested in like playing in the dirt or all the other things that the other boys in my class wanted to do. I was more geared towards academics. I was more focused on school and succeeding in that way, which if you've heard in previous episodes, like that was my whole way of trying to be seen and be validated was by doing well in school. I didn't relate a lot to the other kids in my class, and I got made fun of for being gay and, being a sissy and being called the F slur and all sorts of things like that. And I notice now that, like, in hindsight, being called those things, it relates to what we talked about in part one around how there's this hierarchy where, the manly man is at the top, women are kind of at the bottom. And if a man is acting like a woman, then he's somehow less than,
Right.
a straight man, a masked man, whatever you want to call it. And that very much was my experience as a kid.
Yeah, it sounds really lonely to be in a school with a bunch of kids and be treated that way, and be kind of ostracized and put down and cut down and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And it was interesting because my dad was a softer guy. I don't know that he was necessarily emotionally available per se, but it's not like he was how I think a lot of men experience their dads of drilling in, like, you got to be a man, don't feel your feelings, like, don't be a pussy, all that. That was never him. But he did lead by example for me of not expressing his emotions and keeping a lot to himself and really only expressing anger, which was pretty rare for him. But when he did, like, it had kind of bottled up to the point of what happens when you suppress your feelings. So,
Something comes to mind there. It's this idea or this saying of like, your kids don't always hear what you say, but they definitely see what you do.
exactly.
Sounds like he didn't give you those direct messages of like, suck it up and quit crying or toughen up and be this or do that. Like, he didn't say that,
Right.
but you got the message just from how he was and how he interacted with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yes. And then as I moved into my teenage years, I had a lot of grappling to do with my sexuality, which I felt like I had to do kind of on my own. I didn't come out to my parents until I had already kind of recognized and more or less accepted that I was gay. And it was a hard time. I did feel a lot of loneliness. I actually dated a girl for 4 years in high school and we had a lot of fun together. And we also had a lot of challenges because I did sort of come out to her or express some of what was going on there. And we both struggled a lot with that because we wanted to be together, yet there was this disconnect. And so there was a lot of pain and hurt that happened between us. And she and I are great friends today. Like, she's one of the closest people in my life. But as teenagers, there was a lot that we didn't understand.
Yeah.
Took a lot of things personally and all that. So I share all that because it's a perfect reflection of, as a guy, I felt like I had to go through these things more or less on my own. And it seemed like the only person I could confide in was my romantic partner. And that was a whole lot to be putting on one person.
Yeah.
who was also having her own experience with
Right.
all of that.
It sounds to me like this patriarchal strata really kind of pushed you into trying to conform into that. And you've gotten into this relationship with a female, even though that's not your preferred, who you would want to be with.
Yeah.
But it seems like it really affects you to the point of like, well, I'm going to do this, or like, I can't be me or do what I want fully because it's not acceptable. And there's all this negative feedback coming at me. So I'm going to try and fit into that little box.
Yep.
I'll also say like, that's really common. I've heard it from a lot of gay men. I have a handful of gay male clients, and like 75% of them, or 85 or more percent, have that same story of, I was married for X years, I have children, and I got divorced because I'm gay. And it's like they tried to play that game, that role, and live in the box, and it just tore every single one of them up inside.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's a whole lot baked into that. And I think societal masculinity and all of the things we've been talking about very much tie into that.
Yep.
When I was 17, I began a relationship with a man, and we were together 15 years. And we had our own challenges, which I won't go into here, but in other episodes, we can cover that. But I would say in my 20s and definitely in my 30s, I didn't necessarily feel lonely. I did feel alone in my relationship. It felt like I couldn't express who I was, and it was not a safe place for me. But when it came to friendships in my life, I did feel connected to other people. But what I will say is the vast majority of those friendships were with women. I always felt safer with women. I think this is true for a lot of gay men, where we don't necessarily feel safe with other men, not just straight men, but gay men as well. The women gay men dynamic tends to be one of safety and closeness, and because there's not that competition, there's no threat involved, we can just exist as people.
Right.
Through a lot of that, I continued to have this subconscious buried mentality that men were not safe. And I was very, very selective and cautious and leery of men in my life, where I wouldn't necessarily open up to the people around me.
Yeah.
And that really has not shifted and evolved until the last couple of years of my life, which has been really, really amazing. And we can get into that a little later in this conversation. But I understand where the male loneliness epidemic is coming from, having experienced some degrees of that myself, but maybe a little different than what most guys have experienced.
Yeah, maybe a little different, but not uncommon, and really not all that different, honestly. I'm like, well, he's gay, but it's kind of the same story for a lot of people.
Yeah. It's like the certain levels of the experience are different.
Right.
Different context, but kind of very similar experience as what other guys go through.
The metaphor that's coming up for me right now is like baseball. Let's say, for example, like, let's say you're an outfielder, and like being gay is being in the outfield or in the infield, and being straight is the other one. And it's like, you got a different position and you're doing different things, but you're playing the same game and you can be affected in the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, I appreciate the sports ball reference.
Sports ball.
So how about you? Can you share a little bit about your childhood and what your experience has been with masculinity and friendships, all of that?
Yeah, sure. Love to share. I think we kind of have a little bit of the same experience of our fathers. My dad also was not this direct kind of suck it up and be a man kind of guy, but
Not a bully.
yeah, I mean, somewhat. I am a straight man who I do like working on cars. I never really played sports growing up, but I kind of fit into the mold of like a person who would be at the top of this hierarchy, but I was really negatively affected by it. And I could feel it. When you're a boy, it's kind of okay for you to be within this context, to be girly, right? Or like you're a child, right? You're allowed to be a child. But at a certain point, you start getting the thing of can't be a kid anymore. Stop doing that kid stuff. The crying and the whining and all this, like no more, And definitely got that. But it really hurt that transition point, because my dad was certainly not emotionally available, didn't teach me a whole lot when it comes to like interpersonal life skills. He taught me about cars and he taught me about engineering and things like that and camping and home repair and like all these other things, but like practical hands-on stuff. But he didn't teach me like these interpersonal dynamic kind of skills. He wasn't present. That wasn't part of his stuff. But what came across was like, get under that car and I can't get this part off. He goes, well, pull harder, you know, just like,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of that. And I do remember feeling criticized heavily, not doing good enough on these projects or not knowing something,
Mm.
and I felt stupid. I felt belittled, and that's coming from the most important man in a person's life. And so I definitely learned that maybe I don't want to be vulnerable. Maybe I don't want to be myself with these people, other men, because maybe I'm going to get criticized and belittled for just liking something that I like or having a preference that they don't agree with. So that was contrasted with like my mother, who is extremely loving and extremely emotionally present and has like outrageous interpersonal skills to the point she like has won awards in her parish and all kinds of things like that.
Mm.
And there was so much acceptance for who I am, exactly as I am, and what I like and what I want to do and what my dreams are. So I kind of felt like I had some defense against it internally.
Yeah.
And growing up, I started getting that message, in middle school from the other boys too. We're all getting older together and entering puberty and all that kind of stuff. And was getting that message of, be the tough guy and whatnot. But I'm an artist. I love art, visual art, and just like nature. And that's not sports. That's not team sports. And I wasn't really good at sports. I would say I am now, and I like that stuff now more than before, although it's not my main thing. But I didn't want to sacrifice myself to fit into this box. I wanted to keep who I was because my mother loved who I was. And therefore, I kind of loved who I was. And I was like, well, you guys don't like me. Apparently, something about me is not okay, not as good. So I'm just going to step out of this.
Yeah.
So I quit trying to play that popular game, and I just started hanging out with other guys that were maybe deemed losers. There were other artists or musicians or just softer guys.
Mhm.
I remember one kid in particular. His name was Victor Halmacek. If you're listening, Victor, I remember Victor, and we were not close friends, but it just seemed somehow that Victor just floated above this whole thing somehow. It didn't bother him, and he wasn't affected by it. He somehow looked down on what was happening on these guys. I don't know what his actual experience was,
Yeah.
but he just didn't seem to be experiencing it the same way. I stopped trying to play sports. I remember I got a ball thrown at me one day, and this was like fifth grade or something like that. And it hit me in the head. And I was like, I'm done. That's it. No more. I'm leaving. I'm going to go hang out with these other losers over here because I wasn't going to just take it. I wasn't going to sacrifice myself and just grovel and try and like win my man card from these other assholes. I was like, fuck this. And I don't know what or why I have this like rebellious fuck you attitude, but I've always had it. Of like, you're not going to tell me what to do. And I'm actually better than you. Who the fuck do you think you are? I don't know.
Yeah.
So it was kind of the same story, a little bit of the same story on repeat in high school, trying to find people. And I went to an all boys school. So there was just loads of assholes that really fit the mold, that played hockey, ice hockey, soccer, football, baseball, everything. And they were just walking the halls like they own the fucking place, and everyone else was just walking in a muddy gutter somewhere,
Yeah.
But I, again, kind of just refused to play the game and found my people. But it really affected me. I found friendship, but I felt somehow there was still that internal thing of like, somehow I'm not good enough. And it just really made me push against it and reject all of it. So much so that when it came time to go to college and look at getting a job and all that stuff, I was peering into the adult world and the corporate world. And I was like, this looks like more of the same. This looks like more of this competition, climbing the ladder, putting people down,
Boys club.
jockeying, boys club, and it was all motivated by money. And I was like, fuck that. Like, I already said no a couple times and I'm going to do it again because it just doesn't sound appealing. And I'm not forced to live any particular way. I can make my own choices. I also, the same thing. There was guys that I was friends with, but even then we still weren't super vulnerable with each other. We were certainly probably more so than other groups, but there was still that joking, making fun of kind of dynamic. But we all recognized that we had a heart and we had the commonality of all kind of being victims of these other group of guys. We all knew that we were all hurt by this dynamic and we we're all pretty angry about it, really.
Yeah.
One thing that really became apparent just in the last 3-5 years, I really struggled with, like, female friendships were okay. And I did have a lot of female friends because I could be my full human self with the full range of emotions and experiences. I had lots of female friends, but partially because of that safety, but partially because I wasn't taught how to date and didn't have the confidence to date. So I had a lot of women friends and that felt comfortable and easy. But as I got older through my 20s, I could find relationships, but I could never keep them. And I really, really struggled. There was a lot there. And I'm married now. And one thing that I realize I think that a lot of guys don't is, like, you've got people around you, you have friends, maybe you talk about some things, but there's levels to this kind of loneliness and isolation. And it had become so ingrained in me that I didn't recognize the space that I was in until I met my wife and we started dating and all these problems came up and how basically I was trying to isolate myself from her and sanitize myself and put the emotions in a container so that this acceptable male figure was presentable. And so it was like I was in a relationship, but the loneliness and all of that programming was keeping me isolated, separated inside of it.
Yeah.
I think that's a common problem.
It's feeling alone in the context
Right.
of a relationship.
Right.
Like,
And
on the face value, it looks
Right.
like you're not alone.
right. And
But
you're doing stuff together, but like that deeper intimacy, I broke through that with her and now we're married and have an incredible relationship. But looking from where I am now, the kind of place I was in through my mid-20s, I didn't know how alone I was. I didn't know how much I had isolated myself and how much I had gotten used to isolating myself and kind of quarantining my emotions. And it's just really to protect myself. But I had gotten used to that. And I felt like that was normal and that was okay. And I was healthy, right? But I was really not very healthy at all.
yeah,
Yeah.
I can relate to that so much. Like we miss out on a deeper connection when we're closing people off that way. It might feel safer or it might feel like the right thing to do because we're not putting a burden on someone else
Right.
when we have heavy, hard stuff that we're going through.
Right.
But it really is a disservice to both people in that relationship
Yeah.
when we're not allowing ourselves to share all of us, not just the happy, positive, and neutral, but the hard stuff too.
Yeah. I thought that with this subconscious societal program had taught me that I can handle myself and I can take care of whatever's going on inside of me. It's just me that needs to do that. I'm going to do that. It's my responsibility. That's my shit. I'm going to do that. And that's that. And that is not healthy. I've learned that I can't actually handle my own stuff. And by what I mean is, like, I can't have difficult life experiences and then just work them out over here and then be okay. Like in this little quiet, little dark corner over here, I'm just going to work that out and be okay. Because oftentimes what that translates to just like stuffing it down, ignoring it, or feeling the pain and having nowhere for it to go.
And to take it a step further, one thing I've seen and heard from people is, especially from women in straight relationships, is like they want that vulnerability from their partner, but also when the only person that you're sharing all your stuff with is your partner, that is a lot
Yeah.
for that person to hold with you.
Right.
And that's why male friendships are so important,
Right.
and why it can be helpful to have a therapist or a coach or a men's
Agreed.
circle
Yeah.
or whatever.
It's great if you are at the point where you're sharing openly and vulnerably with your partner, but that's like, okay, you've taken the first step and a very important and necessary step. Very good. Now just keep opening that door,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. And that, I mean, it can be hard. Like,
real hard.
you know, we shared our childhood experiences of like that conditioning that caused us to feel certain ways around
Yeah.
boys or other men.
Yeah.
And that is not a light switch that we can just flip off.
Yeah.
Like I said, you know, I've been on a healing journey for several years now.
Yeah.
And really wasn't until the last 12 to 18 months that I started to open up to more men
Yeah.
besides
Yeah.
my partner.
Yeah. Yep. Takes some
Um,
time, but it happens.
Yeah.
Gotta stay in it. Yeah.
So what about now? What would you say your friendships are like with men now? And what have you done to cultivate that?
Good question. Now I'm selective of who my friends are, which I think was kind of doing back then, like, okay, avoid that asshole. But it's just gotten more refined, you know? It's just gotten to the point of like, okay, if you can't meet me here, this is how I want to exist in the world. I want to allow my full spectrum of humanity to exist and be expressed and seen and to experience it and talk about it and process it and interact with it and all this stuff. If you can't meet me there, we're not going to be the deepest of friends, perhaps, but I can still be friends with you. I think there's kind of levels of friendship that
Yeah.
you have with people.
Absolutely.
And so I've kind of learned this. The people that can meet me at that level are going to be my deepest friends. And the people who want to, right? I want people who want to be my friend, who like are excited about hanging out with me and call me and invite me to shit. Like that's a friend to me. Someone who I can be myself with, who I can be open with, I can talk to about just about anything, and someone who does it with me that wants to hang out with me.
Mhm.
Because there's people that you can do that with that don't necessarily reciprocate, or like they don't have the time or the space to hang out, or there's guys that are still uncomfortable with that. I like to hug my friends. I like to hug just about everybody, actually. And it's like, it's okay for someone else to be uncomfortable with a hug, but there's a little barrier there, you
Mhm.
know? So I've been selective of who I'm spending my time with because I just feel like I'm grabbing life by the horns, you know, or just jumping fully into it. It's not my job to help you fully open up in every one of our hangouts. I want to have some time with people where there's no work or labor necessarily there.
Yeah. Favorite friendships are where all of those levels exist
Yeah.
and we can flow kind of in and out.
Yeah.
Where there is some
Yes.
surface level, you know, talk about
Yes.
TV,
Yes.
movies, and
Yeah.
then it can range from like a really hard time we had as a kid, or like the biggest challenge we're having right now, or
Yeah.
and also the biggest joys and celebrations that we have right now.
Yeah.
I think there can be, you know, when we talk about competition and that sort of thing, some people can feel uncomfortable with either sharing or hearing
Yeah.
celebrations because there's comparison that happens.
Yeah.
And my favorite people in my life are the ones who allow me to celebrate and celebrate with me,
Yes.
and
Yes.
are happy for me. And it both of us are built up by that.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. Like there's different levels, and I've had my own experience, not only with male friendships, but just kind of friendships in general. It can be hard to outgrow our friends
Yeah.
and like people that we used to hang out with a lot. And then there's an evolution where I've evolved and I've healed, and I'm wanting to move into more friendships like you're describing, where
Yeah.
that full range exists, and they're not maybe ready for that. And
Yeah.
that doesn't make them bad or worse or
Right.
anything.
Right.
But it does affect how much time I want to spend with someone.
Right.
It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be this dramatic, like cutting someone out of my life.
Right.
Like that's not a thing.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I am going to be more intentional and thoughtful about how and when I spend time with
Yeah.
someone that I don't feel like I can bring my full self
Right.
to that
Exactly.
relationship.
Yeah.
Or that when I do bring a fuller version of myself, there's discomfort or my vulnerability is met with jokes,
Right.
like that
Right.
doesn't feel great.
Right.
So,
Right.
and for me, like I said, it's been fairly recent in my life that I started to open up or feel like I opened up to men. And a big part of that shift, I credit to this guy right here who, we became friends and started to collaborate in business. And as I've said, had this assumption or generalization, stereotype that straight men were not emotionally safe, emotionally available. And then there's this guy who is all of those things and more. And it has been really special. And Andrew, a few years ago, started a men's circle, which I'd love for you to talk about.
Sure.
And being in that space with primarily straight men has really just shifted my perception. It has been really special and very healing for me, very transformative in terms of how I see men, which I've then taken from that specific environment that's cultivated for a reason into my friendships with other men outside of that space, and just kind of using this as a practice space for me to be like, oh, okay, maybe men are more capable of these things than I gave them credit for.
Yeah.
And taking that into my friendships outside of that space and having some really amazing, really beautiful experiences, both with new friends I've made as well as friends that I've had for years.
That's so great to hear that, because it gives hope, you know, because there's so many people out there, gay and straight, that don't have those kinds of friendships and don't have those safe spaces and don't have that openness and availability in their relationships.
Mhm.
And it's possible to change. And I started my group, the Brotherhood of the Heart, 3 years ago, specifically for that, to create that opportunity. Because I've been hurt, you've been hurt, pretty much almost every man out there has been hurt. And so I feel like what I have witnessed is, I don't know why, but I seem to like and crave vulnerability. And it's kind of the opposite of what most people, most people are like.
Yeah.
But I don't know why, but that's kind of how I am. And when I am in that space with people, I recognize that the other person has some kind of pain or difficulty going on. And I'm like, yeah, it's okay. I'm not going to fucking belittle you, criticize you right now. You can
Mhm.
talk about this, So I wanted to create that space because I feel like every man out there who is dealing with this loneliness, that's like striving to win the game and all that, they're really just like bleeding. They're just hurt,
Mhm.
and they need an opportunity to take a rest, take a break, get a breath, and like start to heal. And I have seen guys like huge, macho, ex-Marine, fucking has killed people kind of guys that are in these circles, and they have the same feelings as everybody else, the same capacity for feeling, the same need to be seen, the same need to have their feelings be seen and witnessed. And maybe those guys may be the most, actually,
Mhm.
because that might be part of who they are. The Marine, the athlete, the macho man, that might be actually true as a part of who they are. But we are way bigger than just one thing, right? And so they have a tender part, they have a caring part, and no place for that part to come out. So when that door, that opportunity is open, when they see like, oh, we're not doing that here. We're not going to play that game here. We're not doing that. We can do something else. It
Mhm.
comes right out. It almost comes spilling out
Mhm.
oftentimes.
It's
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
It's like, let's check your gun at the door and
Uh,
come in here. No one's going to shoot anybody.
yeah,
You know?
it's profound.
Yes.
And, I'll speak for myself. I also crave vulnerability. I want that.
Yeah.
I like thrive on it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it continues to be an evolution for me to be willing to be vulnerable on deeper levels with
Yeah.
people, including with my partner. There's such a level of safety that I've needed to create within myself in order to feel like I can put that out there and be okay with however it's received.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's so great to have an intentional space like that where safety and acceptance and non-judgment are kind of inherent rules of the roost sort of thing. It allows you to practice in that situation.
What would you say to a man that is really struggling with loneliness and friendship and who maybe doesn't have these outlets? Like, how do you get from one island to the other? Or how do you get back to the mainland, shall we say, from your little island
Yeah.
and then floating on your raft in the ocean? How do you get back? You know?
That's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of different ways, and it may not be linear. I know that as men, it would be helpful to hear like a step-by-step
Yeah.
approach to this.
Logically, check this box.
There's a lot of different ways you can go about it. I think the first important step is to set an intention with yourself, getting clear on what you want and what you need, what you would prefer.
Yeah. Maybe what you don't want.
And also get clear on what you don't want.
Yeah.
And maybe what you're ready to let go of, what you're ready to move away from. Getting clear on what's not working for you in your life. And then help that guide, like, what's the opposite of that? What do you want? And maybe this over here is something that's brand new territory that you're not super familiar with. And like, I don't know what I want. I don't know what's possible. So that's why this can be helpful. Like, well, I don't want that. I don't want that.
Right.
So, and that I think can be a really great first step.
Yeah.
And then if you're in a partnership, I think a great first step is to open that door of communication and share kind of how you're feeling.
Yep.
If you're not, depending on where you live, there may be a men's circle that's available to you in your community that might be worth looking into.
Yep.
There's going to be a different energy in every room, in every space, because that's going to be defined based on what guys are there and what their intentions are. There's different ways that those circles can form. The one that Andrew created is, it's non-religious, denominational. It's kind of come as you are.
Right.
There can be some that are available through church communities and things like that.
I say that's the most common. Actually, those men's groups inside of church have been around for a while.
Yeah. There's also groups online. So if you're in a rural space that doesn't have that, I would also encourage you to create your own space. That might be a bigger undertaking for someone who's still kind of figuring this stuff out for themselves. But something that I've learned is like, if you see a need for something and you don't see it available, create it yourself. That's what Andrew did. And that can be really cool. And I would also say that to reiterate the point about you don't need to do these things alone, and also it doesn't have to be all on your partner to help you figure things out. That's what therapists are for, coaches are for. There's group programs that are out there that are available on a paid basis. If that's something that's a fit for you and it's important to you, maybe a financial investment of some sort could be a good fit. So there's all sorts of things, but I think it comes back to that intention and getting clear on what you want and don't want.
And then having the courage to make those choices, make those new choices.
Yeah.
If you're really feeling like you're not resonating with the guys meeting to watch the game every weekend anymore, maybe you still like that, but maybe you want something more. Maybe you put less time with these people over here and you try and find something else through a group, online, stuff like that.
Yeah. And you can test the waters with your existing friendships.
Yes.
It can be very uncomfortable.
Yes.
I imagine a lot of men out there are also craving the same thing that you are.
Yeah.
They may not let on to that as easily as you do.
Right.
And so that also takes courage to kind of shift from that shoulder to shoulder, like we're watching a game or whatever. Like there's a lack of intimacy when we're both facing the same direction and not
versus
at each
this
other.
way. Yeah.
I've seen so much online about like groups of friends that are guys who don't even know the wife's name or why they broke up.
Right.
Which just boggles my mind. And that's maybe an extreme situation, but to invite that shift into your relationship where you are kind of leaning in and just expressing that desire of like, hey, you mind if we just talk, and seeing how it goes and being okay with it maybe not being met with the most open heart. There may be some element of ridicule or making fun or just fear. Maybe they want it too, but they're like, oh God, this is really uncomfortable.
Yep.
It comes with practice. And in my experience, energetically speaking, the more you are clear on what you want and what you don't want, you will naturally invite those experiences, whether it's
Yeah.
with existing friends or you will attract new people into your life
Yeah.
one way or another, where you can start to have that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Agree. One other thing I want to say and bring up on this point of friendship and vulnerability and how we relate to each other and to ourselves is kind of the cost of not cultivating deeper friendship, not cultivating a sense of trust and safety within yourself to be vulnerable with other people. Because I think, kind of like I was talking about, I didn't know how lonely I was before I got into my relationship and and became married. I think we can become blind to what it's really costing us and what we're losing. We're playing that game. We're trying to fit into the mold, and maybe we think we're going to win something. We're going to get something out of it, but we don't look at what it's costing us, what we're losing. And life is not infinite. We do die. Like, it doesn't last forever. And I think that by continuing to play that game, you are losing the opportunity to live a full life. You're losing the opportunity to experience life on a deeper level. You're losing a certain amount of richness or color
Mhm.
from life. That's a little two dimensional. It's reduced
Mhm.
and you can't see it.
I was also hearing the word richness. I often wish I could telepathically communicate with people
Yeah.
because I have struggled a lot in my life in the past. I've been through a fair amount of trauma. I was in a really challenging relationship. I did feel alone for a long time and in different ways. And now I'm on this flip side where life is so good. And I wish I could communicate verbally just how good and full and rich my life is.
Yeah.
And I know that coming where I came from and where I am now, like if I know that's possible for me, I know that's possible
Mhm.
for you as
Yeah.
well.
Mhm.
And it's hard to put that into words.
Yes. Yes.
But I'll speak for myself in that I always had this inherent sense that I'm here to live a really rich, full life.
Mhm.
And whether that's necessarily doing big things, whatever that big things means, but just to live this life to the fullest, which I know may sound cliche, but for a long time I kind of went through the motions and did the thing where a relationship was hard and it's just like kind of just survival of getting
Mhm.
through the day
Yeah.
and that's just all life is. And
Right.
that's not all life
No.
is if you allow yourself to go to bigger, richer, fuller, more
Yeah.
vulnerable, more emotional
Yeah.
spaces. There's a lot to be
A
experienced.
lot. It's like instead of playing out this script, there is a whole different reality that has everything to do with you. And there's all kinds of stuff inside of you that wants to come out into the world, wants to be seen and shared with. That can happen.
Mhm.
But if you keep like playing the robot, you're trying to be who you think you're supposed to be because society says so, you're never going to feel and experience the fullness of who you are, who you really are. You're supposed to explode in this firework of amazing creativity, and you're just sitting in the box
Mhm.
because you think you're something else, right? It's just so limiting. If you don't step out of that box, if you don't act on the pain you're feeling and make different choices, you're never going to know. And it's a
Mhm.
loss for you and everyone around you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If nothing changes, nothing changes.
Changes. Yeah.
And it starts with you. If you want your life to be different, if you want your relationships, your friendships,
Right.
that all starts with you.
Yeah.
And there's so much waiting for you on the other side.
It's very worth the discomfort that it
Mhm.
takes to say no, or I'm going to look different. I'm going to be different. I'm going to say different things. I'm going to walk differently. It takes a lot of courage. You know that as a gay man more than me. It takes a lot of fucking courage to really be who you are. But it is the most worth it thing you'll ever do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you are resonating with this, we'd love for you to subscribe to our channel. We also, both of us, post things on other social media platforms, so you can find us there. But stick around for more content from us.
Yeah.
I've loved this conversation.
Me too.
And drop a comment below if you have a question or want to chat with us.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.